The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. As I descended, the light dwindled slowly, yet at the same time, without altering its quality, as if I and not light were changing, decreasing. Though even when the road ran into trees, you could have read a newspaper. Pretty soon I came to a lane. I turned into it. It was closer and darker than the road, but when it came out at the trolley stop, another wooded marquee, the light was still unchanged. After the lane, it seemed brighter, as though I had walked through night in the lane and come out into morning again. Pretty soon the car came. I got on it, they turning to look at my eye, and found a seat on the left side. The lights were on in the car, so while we ran between trees, I couldn't see anything except my own face and a woman across the aisle with a hat, sitting right on top of her head, with a broken feather in it. But when we ran out of the trees, I could see the twilight again. That quality of light as if time really had stopped for a while, with the sun hanging just under the horizon, and then we passed the marquee where the old man had been eating out of the sack, and the road going on under the twilight, into twilight, and the sense of water, peaceful and swift beyond. Then the car went on, the draft building steadily up in the open door, until it was drawing steadily through the car with the odor of summer and darkness, except honeysuckle. Honeysuckle was the saddest odor of all, I think. I remember lots of them. Wisteria was one. On the rainy days when Mother wasn't feeling quite bad enough to stay away from the windows, we used to play under it. When Mother stayed in bed, Dilsey would put old clothes on us and let us go out in the rain because she said rain never hurt young folks. But if Mother was up, we always began by playing on the porch until she said we were making too much noise. Then we went out. And played under the wisteria frame. This was where I saw the river for the first time this morning, about here. I could feel water beyond the twilight smell. When it bloomed in the spring and it rained, the smell was everywhere. You didn't notice it so much at other times, but when it rained, the smell began to come into the house at twilight. Either it would rain more at twilight, or there was something in the light itself, but it always smelled strongest then, until I would lie in bed thinking, when will it stop? When will it stop? The draft in the door smelled of water, a damp, steady breath. Sometimes I could put myself to sleep saying that over and over until, after the honeysuckle got all mixed up in it, the whole thing came to symbolize night and unrest. I seemed to be lying, neither asleep nor awake, looking down a long corridor of gray half-light where all stable things had become shadowy, paradoxical. All I had done, shadows, all I had felt, suffered, taking visible form, antic and perverse, mocking, without relevance inherent themselves, with the denial of the significance they should have affirmed, thinking I was not, who was not who. I could smell the curves of the river beyond the dusk, and I saw the last light supine and tranquil upon tide flats like pieces of broken mirror. Then beyond them, lights began in the pale, clear air, trembling a little like butterflies hovering a long way off. Benjamin, the child of. How he used to sit before that mirror. Refuge unfailing in which conflict tempered, silence reconciled. Benjamin, the child of mine, old age, held hostage into Egypt. Oh, Benjamin. Dilsey said it was because Mother was too proud for him. They came into white people's lives like that, in sudden, sharp, black trickles that isolate white facts for an instant in unarguable truth like under a microscope. The rest of the time, just voices that laugh when you see nothing to laugh at. Tears when no reasons for tears. They will bet on the odd or even number of mourners at a funeral. A brothel full of them in Memphis went into a religious trance, ran naked into the street. It took 3 policemen to subdue one of them. Yes, Jesus. Oh, good man. Jesus. Oh, that good man. The car stopped. I got out. with them looking at my eye. When the trolley came, it was full. I stopped on the back platform. "Seats up front," the conductor said. I looked into the car. There were no seats on the left side. "I'm not going that far," I said. "I'll just stand here." We crossed the river, the bridge, that is, arching slowly and high into space, between silence and nothingness where lights, yellow and red and green, trembled in the clear air, repeating themselves. "Better go up front. Get a seat," the conductor said. "I'll get off pretty soon," I said. "Couple of blocks." I got off before we reached the post office. They'd all be sitting around somewhere by now, though, and then I was hearing my watch, and I began to listen for the chimes. And I touched Shreve's letter through my coat, the bitten shadows of the elms flowing upon my hand, and then, as I turned into the quad, the chimes did begin, and I went on, while the notes came up like ripples on a pool and passed me, and went on, saying, "Quarter to what?" "All right. Quarter to what?" Our windows were dark. The entrance was empty. I walked close to the left wall when I entered, but it was empty. Just the stairs, curving up into shadows, echoes of feet in the sad generations like light dust upon the shadows, my feet waking them like dust lightly to settle again. I could see the letter before I turned the light on, propped against a book on the table so I would see it. Calling him my husband. And then Spoade said they were going somewhere, would not be back until late, and Mrs. Bland would need another cavalier. But I would have seen him, and he cannot get another car for an hour because after 6 o'clock. I took out my watch and listened to it clicking away, not knowing it couldn't even lie. Then I laid it face up on the table and took Mrs. Bland's letter and tore it across and dropped the pieces into the wastebasket and took off my coat, vest, collar, tie, and shirt. The tie was spoiled too, but then ends. Maybe a pattern of blood, he could call that the one Christ was wearing. I found the gasoline in Shreve's room and spread the vest on the table where it would be flat and opened the gasoline. The first car in town, a girl. Girl, that's what Jason couldn't bear, smell of gasoline, making him sick, then got madder than ever because of a girl. Girl, had no sister, but Benjamin, the child of my sorrowful, if I'd just had a mother so I could say, mother, mother. It took a lot of gasoline, and then I couldn't tell if it was still the stain or just the gasoline. It had started to cut the smarting again, so I went to wash. I hung the vest on a chair and lowered the light cord so that the bulb would be drying the splotch. I washed my face and hands, but even then I could smell it within the soap, stinging, constricting the nostrils a little. Then I opened the bag and took the shirt and collar and tie out and put the bloody ones in and closed the bag and dressed. While I was brushing my hair, the half hour went. But there was, until the 3/4 anyway, except, suppose, seeing on the rushing darkness only his own face, no broken feather, unless 2 of them, but not like 2, that going to Boston the same night than my face, his face, for an instant, across the crashing, went out of darkness, 2 lighted windows and rigid fleeing crash, gone, his face, and mine, just as I saw, did, I see not, goodbye. The marquee empty of eating, the road empty in darkness and silence, the bridge arching into silence, darkness, sleep, the water peaceful and swift, not goodbye. I turned out the light and went into my bedroom, out of the gasoline, but I could still smell it. I stood at the window, the curtains moved slow out of the darkness, touching my face like someone breathing asleep, breathing slow into the darkness again, leaving the touch. After they had gone upstairs, Mother lay back in her chair, the camphor handkerchief to her mouth. Father hadn't moved. He sat still beside her, holding her hand, the bellowing hammering away like no place for it in silence. When I was little, there was a picture in one of our books, a dark place into which a single weak ray of light came slanting upon 2 faces lifted out of the shadow. You know what I'd do if I were a king? She never was a queen or a fairy. She was always a king or a giant or a general. I'd break that place open and drag them out, and I'd whip them good. It was torn out, jagged out. I was glad. I'd have to turn back to it until the dungeon was Mother herself, she and Father upward into weak light, holding hands, and us, lost, somewhere below, even them, without even a ray of light. Then a honeysuckle got into it. As soon as I turned off the light and tried to go to sleep, it would begin to come into the room in waves, building and building up until I would have to pant to get any air at all out of it, until I would have to get up and feel my way like I was when I was a little boy. Hands can see touching in the mind, shaping unseen door. Now nothing hands can see. My nose could see gasoline, the vest on the table, the odor. The corridor was still empty of all the feet and sad generations seeking water, yet the eyes unseeing, clenched like teeth, not disbelieving, doubting even the absence of pain, shin, ankle, knee, the long invisible flowing of the stair railing, where a misstep into the darkness filled with sleeping. Mother, Father, Caddy, Jason, Maury, door. I am not afraid, only Mother, Father, Caddy, Jason, Maury. Getting so far ahead, sleeping. I will sleep fast when I door. It was empty, too, the pipes, the porcelain, the stained quiet walls, the throne of contemplation. I had forgotten the glass, but I could. Hands can see, cooling fingers, invisible swan throat, where less than Moses' rod the glass, touch, tentative, not to drumming, leaning, cool, throat drumming, cooling the metal of glass, fool over fool, cooling the glass, the fingers flushing, sleep, leaving the taste of dampened sleep in the long silence of the throat. I returned up the corridor, waking the lost feet and whispering battalions in the silence, into the gasoline, the watch telling its furious lie on the dark table. Then the curtains, breathing out of the dark upon my face, leaving the breathing upon my face. A quarter hour yet, and then I'll not be. The peacefulest words. Peacefulest words. Non fui, sum, fui, non sum. Somewhere I heard bells once. Mississippi or Massachusetts. I was. I am not. Massachusetts or Mississippi. Shreve has a bottle in his trunk. Aren't you going to even open it? Mr. and Mrs. Jason Richard Compson announced that 3 times. Days. Aren't you even going to open it? Marriage of their daughter Candace. That liquor teaches you to confuse the means with the end. I am. Drink. I was not. Let us sell Benji's pasture so that Quentin may go to Harvard and I may knock my bones together, and together I will be dead in. Was it 1 year, Caddy said. Shreve has a bottle in his trunk. Sir, I will not need Shreves. I have sold Benji's pasture, and I can be dead in Harvard, Caddy said. In the caverns and the grottos of the sea, tumbling peacefully to the wavering tides, because Harvard is such a fine sound. 40 acres is no high price for a fine sound. A fine dead sound. We will swap Benji's pasture for a fine dead sound. It will last him a long time because he cannot hear it unless he can smell it. As soon as she came in the door, he began to cry. I thought all the time it was just one of those town squirts that Father was always teasing her about, until I didn't notice him any more than any other stranger drummer, what thought they were army shirts, until all of a sudden I knew he wasn't thinking of me at all as a potential source of harm, but was thinking of her. When he looked at me, was looking at me through her, like through a piece of colored glass. Why must you meddle with me? Don't you know it won't do any good? I thought you'd have left that for Mother and Jason. Did Mother set Jason to spy on you? I wouldn't have. Women only use other people's codes of honor. It's because she loves Caddy. Staying downstairs even when she was sick, so Father couldn't kid Uncle Maury before Jason. Father said Uncle Maury was too poor a classicist to risk the blind immortal boy in person. He should have chosen Jason, because Jason would have made only the same kind of blunder Uncle Maury himself would have made not one to get him a black eye. The Patterson boy was smaller than Jason, too. They sold the kites for a nickel apiece until the troubles over finances. Jason got a new partner, still smaller, one small enough anyway, because TP said Jason's still treasurer, but Father said, why, Uncle Maury, work? If he, Father, could support 5 or 6 ends that did nothing at all but sit with their feet in the oven, he certainly could board and lodge Uncle Maury now and then and lend him a little money, who kept his father's belief in the celestial derivation of his own species at such a fine heat. Mother would cry and say that Father believed his people were better than hers, that he was ridiculing Uncle Maury to teach us the same thing. She couldn't see that Father was teaching us that all men are just accumulations, dolls stuffed with sawdust, swept up from trash heaps where all previous dolls had been thrown away, the sawdust flowing from what wound and what side that not for me died not. It used to be I thought of death as a man sounding something like grandfather, a friend of his, a kind of private and particular friend, like we used to think of grandfather's desk, not to touch it, not even to talk loud in the room where it was. I always thought of them as being together somewhere all the time, waiting for old Colonel Sartoris to come down and sit with them, waiting on a high place beyond cedar trees. Colonel Sartoris was on a still higher place looking out across at something, and they were waiting for him to get done looking at it and come down. Grandfather wore his uniform, and we could hear the murmur of their voices from beyond the cedars. They were always talking, and Grandfather was always right. The 3/4 began. The first note sounded, measured and tranquil, serenely peremptory, emptying the unhurried silence for the next one, and that's it. If people could only change one another forever that way, merge like a flame, swirling up for an instant, then blown cleanly out along the cool, eternal dark, instead of lying there, trying not to think of the swing until all the cedars came to have that vivid, dead smell of perfume that Benji hated so. Just by imagining the clump, it seemed to me that I could not hear whispers, secret surges, smell the beating of hot blood under wild, unsecret flesh, watching against red eyelids the swine, untethered, in pairs rushing, coupled into the sea, and he must just stay awake and see evil done for a little while it's not always, and it doesn't have to be even that long for a man of courage, and does you consider that courage, and yes, don't you? And he and every man is the arbiter of his own virtues, whether or not you consider it courageous is of more importance than the act itself, than any act otherwise you could not be in earnest, and you don't believe I am serious, and I think you are too serious to give me any cause for alarm. You wouldn't have felt driven to the expedient of telling me you would have committed incest otherwise, and I wasn't lying, and you wanted to sublimate a piece of natural human folly into a horror, and then exercise it with truth, and it was to isolate her out of the loud world so that it would have to flee us out of necessity. And then the sound of it would be as though it had never been, and he did not, you try to make her do it, and I was afraid to. I was afraid she might, and then it wouldn't have done any good. But if I could tell you we did it, would have been so, and then the others wouldn't be so, and then the world would roar away, and he and now this other you are not lying now either, but you are still blind to what is in yourself, to that part of general truth, the sequence of natural events and their causes, which shadows every man's brow, even Benji's. You are not thinking of finitude, you are contemplating an apotheosis in which a temporary state of mind will become symmetrical above the flesh and aware both of itself and of the flesh. It will not quite discard you, will not even be dead, and temporary, and you cannot think to bear that some day it will no longer hurt you like this. Now we're getting at it. You seem to regard it merely as an experience that will whiten your hair overnight, so to speak, without altering your appearance at all. You won't do it under these conditions. It will be a gamble. And the strangest thing is that man who is conceived by accident and whose every breath is a fresh cast with dice already loaded against him will not face that final main which he knows beforehand he has assuredly to face without essaying expedients, ranging all the way from violence to petty chicanery that would not deceive a child until some day, in very disgust, he risks everything on a single blind turn of a card. No man ever does that under the first fury of despair or remorse or bereavement. He does it only when he has realized that even the despair or remorse or bereavement is not particularly important to the dark dice man, and I temporary, and he. It is hard believing to think that a love or a sorrow is a bond purchased without design and which matures willy-nilly and is recalled without warning to be replaced by whatever issue the gods happen to be floating at the time. No, you will not do that until you come to believe that even she was not quite worth despair, perhaps, and I will never do that. Nobody knows what I know, and I think you'd better go on up to Cambridge right away. You might go up into Maine for a month. You can afford it if you are careful. And it might be a good thing watching pennies has healed more scars than Jesus. And I suppose I realize what you believe. I will realize up there next week or next month. And then you will remember that, for you go to Harvard has been your mother's dream since you were born. And no Compson has ever disappointed a lady, and I, temporary, it will be better for me, for all of us, and he, every man, is the arbiter of his own virtues, but let no man prescribe for another man's well-being, and I, temporary, and he was the saddest word of all, and there is nothing else in the world. It's not despair until time. It's not even time until it was. The last note sounded. At last it dropped, vibrating, and the darkness was still again. I entered the sitting room and turned on the light. I put my vest on. The gasoline was faint now, barely noticeable, and in the mirror the stain didn't show. Not like my eye did, anyway. I put on my coat. Shreve's letter crackled through the cloth, and I took it out and examined the address and put it in my side pocket. Then I carried the watch into Shreve's room and put it in his drawer and went to my room and got a fresh handkerchief and went to the door and put my hand on the light switch. Then I remembered I hadn't brushed my teeth, so I had to open the bag again. I found my toothbrush and got some of Shreve's paste and went out and brushed my teeth. I squeezed the brush as dry as I could and put it back in the bag and shut it and went to the door again. Before I snapped the light out, I looked around to see if there was anything else. Then I saw that I had forgotten my hat. I'd have to go by the post office, and I'd be sure to meet some of them. And they'd think I was a Harvard Square student, making like he was a senior. I'd forgotten to brush it, too, but Shreve had a brush, so I didn't have to open the bag anymore. April 6th, 1928. Once a bitch, always a bitch, what I say. I says you're lucky if her playing out of school is that all that worries you. I says she ought to be down there in that kitchen right now instead of up there in her room, gobbing paint on her face and waiting for 6 ends that can't even stand up out of chairs unless they got a full pan of bread and meat to balance them, to fix breakfast for her. And Mother says, but to have the school authorities think that I have no control over her, that I can't... Well, I says, you can't, can you? You never have tried to do anything with her, I says. How do you expect to begin this late when she's 17 years old? She thought about that for a while. But to have them think that I didn't even know she had a report card. She told me last fall that they had quit using them this year, and now for Professor Junkin to call me on the telephone and tell me if she's absent one more time, she'll have to leave school. How does she do it? Where does she go? You're downtown all day. You ought to see her if she stays on the streets. Yes, I says. If she stayed on the streets, I don't reckon she'd be playing out of school just to do something she could do in public, I says. What do you mean? She says. I don't mean anything, I says. I just answered your question. Then she begun to cry again, talking about how her own flesh and blood rose up to curse her. You asked me, I says. I don't mean you, she says. You're the only one of them that isn't a reproach to me. Sure, I says. I never had time to be. I never had time to go to Harvard like Quentin or drink myself into the ground like Father. I had to work. But of course, if you want me to follow her around and see what she does, I can quit the store and get a job where I can work at night. Then I can watch her during the day, and you can use Ben for the night shift. I know I'm just a trouble and a burden to you, she says, crying on the pillow. I ought to know it, I says. You've been telling me that for 30 years. Even Ben ought to know it now. Do you want me to say anything to her about it? Do you think it will do any good? She says. Not if you come down there interfering just when I get started, I says. If you want me to control her, just say so and keep your hands off. Every time I try to, you come butting in and then she gives us both of us the laugh. Remember, she's your own flesh and blood, she says. Sure, I says. That's just what I'm thinking of, flesh. And a little blood, too, if I had my way. When people act like ends, no matter who they are, the only thing to do is treat them like an end. I'm afraid you'll lose your temper with her, she says. Well, I says, you haven't had much luck with your system. You want me to do anything about it or not? Say one way or the other. I've got to get him on to work. I know you have to slave your life away for her, she says. You know, if I had my way, you'd have an office of your own to go to. And now has it become a Bascombe? Because you are a Bascombe, despite your name. I know that if your father could have foreseen... Well, I says, I reckon he's entitled to guess wrong now and then, like anybody else, even a Smith or a Jones. She begun to cry again. To hear you speak bitterly of your dead father, she says. All right, I says, all right. Have it your way. But as I haven't got an office, I'll have to get on to what I have got. Do you want me to say anything to her? I'm afraid you'll lose your temper with her, she says. All right, I says. I won't say anything then. But something must be done, she says, to have people think I permit her to stay out of school and run about the streets and that I can't prevent her doing. Jason, she says, how could you? How could you leave me with these burdens? Now, I says, you make yourself sick. Why don't you either lock her up all day too or turn her over to me and quit worrying over her? My own flesh and blood, she says, crying. So I says, all right, I'll tend to her. Quit crying now. Don't lose your temper, she says. She's just a child, remember? No, I says, I won't. I went out, closing the door. Jason, she says. I didn't answer. I went down the hall. Jason, she says beyond the door. I went on downstairs. There wasn't anybody in the dining room. Then I heard her in the kitchen. She was trying to make Dilsey let her have another cup of coffee. I went in. I reckon that's your school costume, is it? I says. Or maybe today's a holiday. Just have a cup, Dilsey, she says, please. No, sir, Dilsey says. I ain't going to do it. You ain't got no business with my more than one cup. 17-year-old guy, let alone what Miss Caroline say. You go and get dressed for school so you can ride to town with Jason. You fixing to be late again. No, she's not, I says. We're going to fix that right now. She looked at me and the cup in her hand. She brushed her hair back from her face, her kimono slipping off her shoulder. You put that cup down and come in here a minute, I says. What for's? She says. Come on, I says. Put that cup in the sink and come in here. What you up to now, Jason? Dilsey says. You may think you can run over me like you do your grandmother and everybody else, I says. But you'll find out different. I'll give you 10 seconds to put that cup down like I told you. She quit looking at me. She looked at Dilsey. What time is it, Dilsey? She says. When it's 10 seconds, you whistle. Just a half cup. Dilsey, please. I grabbed her by the arm. She dropped the cup. It broke on the floor and she jerked back, looking at me, but I held her arm. Dilsey got up from her chair. You, Jason, she says. You will turn me loose, Quentin says. I'll slap you. You will? Will you? I says. You will you? She slapped at me. I caught that hand too and held her like a wildcat. You will you? I says. You think you will? You, Jason, Dilsey says. I dragged her into the dining room. Her kimono came unfastened, flapping about her, damn near naked. Dilsey came hobbling along. I turned and kicked the door shut in her face. You keep out of here, I says. Quentin was leaning against the table, fastening her kimono. I looked at her. Now, I says, I want to know what you mean, playing out of school and telling your grandmother lies and forging her name on your report and worrying her sick. What do you mean by it? She didn't say anything. She was fastening her kimono up under her chin, pulling it tight around her, looking at me. She hadn't got around to painting herself yet, and her face looked like she had polished it with a gun rag. I went and grabbed her wrist. What do you mean? I says. None of your damn business, she says. You turned me loose. Dilsey came in the door. You, Jason, she says. You get out of here like I told you, I says, not even looking back. I want to know where you go when you play out of school, I says. You keep off the streets, or I'd see you. Who do you play with? Or are you hiding out in the woods with one of those damn slick-headed jelly beans? Is that where you go? You old goddamn, she says. She fought, but I held her. You damn old goddamn, she says. I'll show you, I says. You may can scare an old woman off, but I'll show you who's got a hold of you now. I held her with one hand, then she quit fighting and watched me, her eyes getting wide and black. What are you gonna do? She says. You wait until I get this belt out and I'll show you, I says, pulling my belt out. Then Dilsey grabbed my arm. Jason, she says. You Jason, ain't you ashamed of yourself? Dilsey, Quentin says. Dilsey. I ain't gonna let him, Dilsey says. Don't you worry, honey. She held onto my arm, then the belt came out and I jerked loose and flung her away. She stumbled into the table. She was so old she couldn't do any more than move, hardly. But that's all right. We need somebody in the kitchen to eat up the grub the young ones can't tote off. She came hobbling between us, trying to hold me again. Hit me then, she says. Have nothing else but be hitting and somebody won't do you. Hit me, she says. You think I won't? I says. I don't put no devilment beyond you, she says. Then I heard Mother on the stairs. I might have known she wasn't going to keep out of it. I let go. She stumbled back against the wall, holding her kimono shut. All right, I says. We'll just put this off a little while. But don't think you can run it over me. I'm not an old woman or an old half-dead inn either, you damn little slut, I says. Dilsey, she says. Dilsey, I want my mother. Dilsey went to her. Now, she said. He ain't going to so much as lay his hand on you while his eyes are here. Mother came down the stairs. Jason, she says. Dilsey. Now, Dilsey says. I ain't going to let him touch you. She put her hand on Quentin. She knocked it down. You damn old inn, she says. She ran toward the door. Dilsey, Mother says on the stairs. Quentin ran up the stairs, passing her. Quentin, Mother says. You, Quentin. Quentin ran on. I could hear her when she reached the top, then in the hall, then the door slammed. Mother had stopped. Then she came on. Dilsey, she says. All right, Dilsey says. I's a-coming. Go on and get that car and wait now, she says. So you can carry her to school. Don't you worry, I says. I'll take her to school, and I'm going to see that she stays there. I started this thing, and I'm going through with it. Jason, Mother says on the stairs. Gone now, Dilsey says, going toward the door. You want to get her started, too. How's it coming, Miss Caroline? I went on out. I could hear him on the steps. You going back to bed now, Dilsey was saying. Just sure know you ain't feeling well enough to get up yet. Go on back now. I'll go to see if she gets to school in time. I went on out the back to back the car out. Then I had to go all the way around to the front before I found him. I thought I told you to put that tire on the back of the car, I says. I ain't had time, Buster says. Ain't nobody to watch him till Mammy get done in the kitchen. Yes, I says. I feed a whole damn kitchen full of ends to follow around after him, but if I want an automobile tire change, I gotta do it myself. I ain't had nobody to leave him with, he says. Then he begun moaning and slobbering. Take him on round to the back, I says. The hell makes you want to keep him around here where people can see him? I made them go on before he got started bellowing good. It's bad enough on Sundays with that damn field full of people that haven't got a sideshow and 6 ends to feed, knocking a damn oversized mothball around. He's going to keep on running up and down that fence and bellowing every time they come in sight until first thing I know, they're going to begin charging me golf dues. Then Mother and Dilsey will have to get a couple of china doorknobs and a walking stick and work it out unless I play at night with a lantern. Then they'd send us all to Jackson, maybe. God knows they'll hold Old Home Week when that happened. I went on back to the garage. There was the tire leaning against the wall, but be damned if I was going to put it on. I backed out and turned around. She was standing by the drive. I says, I know you haven't got any books. I just want to ask you, what did you do with them? If it's any of my business. Of course, I haven't got any right to ask. I says, I'm just the one that paid $11.65 for them last September. Mother buys my books, she says. There's not a cent of your money on me. I'd starve first. Yes, I says. You tell your grandmother that and see what she says. You don't look all the way naked, I says, even if that stuff on your face does hide more of you than anything else you got on. Do you think any money of hers either paid for a cent of this? She says. Ask your grandmother, I says. Ask her what became of those checks. You saw her burn one of them, as I remember. She wasn't even listening, with her face all gummed up with paint and her eyes hard as a feist dog's. Do you know what I'd do if I thought your money or hers either bought 1 cent of this? She says, putting her hand on her dress. What would you do? I says. Wear a barrel? I'd tear it right off and throw it into the street, she says. Don't you believe me? Sure you would, I says. You do it every time. See if I wouldn't, she says. She grabbed the neck of her dress in both hands and made like she would tear it. You tear that dress, I says, and I'll give you a whipping right here that you'll remember all your life. See if I don't, she says. Then I saw that she was really trying to tear it right off of her. By the time I got the car stopped and grabbed her hands, there was about a dozen people looking. It made me so mad for a minute, it kind of blinded me. You do a thing like that again, and I'll make you sorry you ever drew breath, I says. I'm sorry now, she says. She quit, then her eyes turned kind of funny, and I says to myself, if you cry here in this car on the street, I'll whip you. I'll wear you out. Lucky for her, she didn't, so I turned her wrist loose and drove on. Luckily, we were near an alley where I could turn into the back street and dodge the square. They were already putting the tent up in Beard's lot. Earl had already given me the 2 passes for us show windows. She sat there with her face turned away, chewing her lip. I'm sorry now, she says. I don't see why I was ever born. And I know of at least one other person that don't understand all he knows about that, I says. I stopped in front of the schoolhouse. The bell had rung, and the last of them were just going in. You're on time for once, anyway, I says. Are you going in there and stay there, or I am coming with you and make you? She got out and banged the door. Remember what I say, I says. I mean it. Let me hear one more time that you were slipping up and down back alleys with one of those damn squirts. She turned back at that. I don't slip around, she says. I dare anybody to know everything I do. And they all know it, too, I says. Everybody in this town knows what you are. But I won't have it any more, you hear? I don't care what you do myself, I says. But I've got a position in this town, and I'm not going to have any member of my family going on like an inn wench, you hear me? I don't care, she says. I'm bad, and I'm going to hell, and I don't care. I'd rather be in hell than anywhere where you are. If I hear one more time that you haven't been to school, you wish you were in hell, I says. She turned and ran across the yard. One more time, remember, I says. She didn't look back. I went to the post office and got the mail and drove on to the store and parked. Earl looked at me when I came in. I gave him a chance to say something about my being late, but he just said, Those cultivators come. You better help Uncle Job put 'em on. I went on to the back where old Job was uncrating them. at the rate of about 3 bolts to the hour.
You ought to be working for me, I says. Every other no-count inn in town eats in my kitchen.
I works to suit the man what pays me Saturday night, he says. When I does that, it don't leave me a whole lot of time to please other folks. He screwed up a nut. Ain't nobody works much in this country except a boll weevil nowadays, he says.
You'd better be glad you're not a boll weevil waiting on these cultivators, I says.
You'd work yourself to death before they got ready to prevent you. That's the truth, he says. Boll weevil got a tough time. Work every day in the week out in the hot sun, rain or shine. Ain't got no front porch to sit on to watch the watermelons growing, and Saturday don't mean nothing at all to him.
Saturday wouldn't mean nothing to you either, I says, if it depended on me to pay your wages. Get those things out of the crates now and drag 'em inside.
I opened her letter first and took the check out. Just like a woman, 6 days late. Yet they try to make men believe that they're capable of conducting a business. How long would a man that thought the first of the month came on the 6th last in business? And like as not, when they sent the bank statement out, she would want to know why I never deposited my salary until the 6th. Things like that never occur to a woman. I had no answer to my letter about Quentin's Easter dress. Did it arrive all right? I've had no answer to the last 2 letters I wrote her, though the check in the second one was cashed with the other check. Is she sick? Let me know at once, or I'll come there and see for myself. You promised you would let me know when she needed things. I will expect to hear from you before the 10th. No, you'd better wire me at once. You are opening my letters to her. I know that as well as if I were looking at you. You'd better wire me at once about her to this address. About that time, Earl started yelling at Job, so I put him away and went over to try to put some life into him. What this country needs is white labor. Let these damn trifling ends starve for a couple of years, and then they'd see what a soft thing they have. Long toward 10 o'clock, I went up front. There was a drummer there. It was a couple of minutes to 10, and I invited him up the street to get a Coca-Cola. We got to talking about crops.
There's nothing to it, I says. Cotton is a speculator's crop. They fill the farmer full of hot air and get him to raise a big crop for them to whipsaw on the market to trim the suckers with. Do you think the farmer gets anything out of it except a redneck and a hump in his back? You think the man that sweats to put it into the ground gets a red cent more than a bare living? I says. Let him make a big crop and it won't be worth picking. Let him make a small crop and he won't have enough to gin. And what for? So a bunch of damn Eastern Jews. I'm not talking about men of the Jewish religion, I says. I've known Jews that were fine citizens. You might be one yourself, I says.
Nah, he says, I'm an American.
No offense, I says. I give every man his due, regardless of religion or anything else. I have nothing against Jews as an individual, I says. It's just the race. You'll admit they produce nothing. They follow the pioneers into a new country and sell them clothes.
You're thinking of Armenians, he says, aren't you? A pioneer wouldn't have any use for new clothes.
No offense, I says. I don't hold a man's religion against him.
Sure, he says, I'm an American. My folks have some French blood. Why you have nose like this? I'm an American, all right.
So am I says. Not many of us left. What I'm talking about is the fellows that sit up there in New York and trim the sucker gamblers.
That's right, he says. Nothing to gambling for a poor man. There ought to be a law against it.
Don't you think I'm right? I says.
Yeah, he says. I guess you're right. Farmer catches it coming and going.
I know I'm right, I says. It's a sucker game, unless a man gets inside information from somebody that knows what's going on. I happen to be associated with some people who are right there on the ground. I have one of the biggest manipulators in New York for an advisor, way I do it, I says. I never risk much at a time. It's a fellow that thinks he knows it all and is trying to make a killing with $3 that they're laying for. That's why they are in the business.
Then it struck 10. I went up to the telegraph office. It opened up a little, just like they said. I went into the corner and took out a telegram again, just to be sure. While I was looking at it, a report came in. It was up 2 points. They were all buying. I could tell that from what they were saying. Getting aboard. Like they didn't know it could go but one way. Like there was a law or something against doing anything but buying. Well, I reckon those Eastern Jews have got to live too, but I'll be damned if it hasn't come to a pretty pass when any damn foreigner
that can't make a living in the country where God put him can come to this one and take money right out of Americans' pockets. It was up 2 points more. 4 points. But hell, they were right there and they knew what was going on, and if I wasn't going to take the advice, what was I paying them $10 a month for? I went out, then I remembered and came back and sent the wire. All well. Q writing today. Q? The operator says. Yes, I says. Q. Can't you spell Q? I just asked to be sure, he says. You send it like I wrote it and I'll guarantee you to be sure, I says. Send it to collect. What you sending, Jason? Doc Wright says, looking over my shoulder. Is that a code message to buy? That's all right about that, I says. You boys use your own judgment. You know more about it than those New York fellas do. Well, I ought to, Doc says. I'd have saved money this year raising it at 2 cents a pound. Another report come in. It was down a point. Jason's selling, Hopkins says. Look at his face. That's all right about what I'm doing, he says. You boys follow your own judgment. Those rich New York Jews have got to live like everybody else, I says. I went on back to the store. Earl was busy up front. I went on back to the desk and read Lorraine's letter. Dear Daddy, wish you were here. No good parties when Daddy's out of town. I miss my sweet Daddy. I reckon she does. Last time I gave her $40. Gave it to her. I never promise a woman anything nor let her know what I'm going to give her. That's the only way to manage them. Always keep them guessing. If you can't think of any other way to surprise them, give them a bust in the jaw. I tore it up and turned it over the spittoon. I make it a rule never to keep a scrap of paper bearing a woman's hand, and I never write them at all. Lorraine is always after me to write her, but I says, anything I forgot to tell you will save till I get to Memphis again. But I says I don't mind you writing me now and then in a plain envelope, but if you ever try to call me up on the telephone, Memphis won't hold you, I says. I says when I'm up there, I'm one of the boys, but I'm not going to have any woman calling me on the telephone. Here, I says, giving her $40. If you ever get drunk and take a notion to call me on the phone, just remember this and count 10 before you do it. When that be? She says. What? I says. When you coming back? She says. I'll let you know, I says. Then she tried to buy a beer, but I wouldn't let her. Keep your money, I says. Buy yourself a dress with it. I gave the maid a 5 too. After all, like I say, money has no value. It's just the way you spend it. It don't belong to anybody, so why try to hoard it? It just belongs to the man that can get it and keep it. There's a man right here in Jefferson made a lot of money selling rotten goods to inns. Lived in a room over the store about the size of a pig pen and did his own cooking. About 4 or 5 years ago, he was taken sick. Scared the hell out of him so that when he was up again, he joined the church and bought himself a Chinese missionary. $5,000 a year. I often think how mad he'll be if he was to die and find out there's not any heaven when he thinks about that $5,000 a year. Like I say, you'd better go on and die now and save money. When it was burned good, I was just about to shove the others into my coat when all of a sudden something told me to open Quentin's before I got home. But about that time, Earl started yelling for me up front, so I put them away and went and waited on the damn redneck while he spent 15 minutes deciding whether he wanted a 20-cent hame string or a 35-cent one. You'd better take that good one, I says. How do you fellows ever expect to get ahead trying to work with cheap equipment? This one ain't good, he says. Why you got it on sale? I didn't say it wasn't any good, I says. I said it's not as good as the other one. How you know it's not? He says. You ever use every one of them? Because they don't ask 35 cents for it, I says. That's how I know it's not as good. He held the 20-cent one in his hands, drawing it through his fingers. I reckon I'll take this here one, he says. I offered to take it and wrap it, but he rolled it up and put it in his overalls. Then he took out a tobacco sack and finally got it untied and shook some coins out. Handed me a quarter. That 15 cents will buy me a snack of dinner, he says. All right, I says. You're the doctor. But don't come complaining to me next year when you have to buy a new outfit. I ain't making next year's crop yet, he says. Finally, I got rid of him, but every time I took that letter out, something would come up. They were all in town for the show, coming in droves to give their money to something that brought nothing to the town and wouldn't leave anything except what those grafters in the mayor's office will split among themselves, and Earl chasing back and forth like a hen in a coop, saying, "Yes, ma'am, Mr. Compson will wait on you. Jason, show this lady a churn or a nickel's worth of screen hooks." Well, Jason likes work. I says no, I never had university advantages because at Harvard they teach you how to go for a swim at night without knowing how to swim, and at Sewanee they don't even teach you what water is. I says you might send me to the state university. Maybe I'll learn how to stop my clock with a nose spray, and then you can send Ben to the Navy, I says, or to the cavalry anyway. They use geldings in the cavalry, and then when she sent Quentin home for me to feed, too, I says, I guess that's right, too. Instead of me having to go way up north for a job, they sent the job down here to me, and then Mother began to cry. And I says it's not that I have no objection to having it here. If it's any satisfaction to you, I'll quit work and nurse it myself and let you and Dilsey keep the flour barrel full, or Ben. Rent him out to a sideshow. There must be folks somewhere that would pay a dime to see him. Then she cried more and kept saying my poor afflicted baby, and I says, yes, he'll be quite a help to when he gets his growth not being more than 1.5 times as high as me now. And she says she'd be dead soon, and then we'd all be better off. And so I says, all right, have it your way. It's your grandchild, which is more than any other grandparents it got can say for certain. Only I say it's only a question of time. If you believe she'll do what she says and not try to see it, you fool yourself, because the first time that Mother kept on saying, thank God you are not a Compson except in name, because you're all I have left now, you and Maury. And I says, well, I could spare Uncle Maury myself. And then they came and said they were ready to start. Mother stopped crying then. She pulled her veil down and we went downstairs. Uncle Maury was coming out of the dining room, his handkerchief to his mouth. They kind of made a lane and we went out of the door just in time to see Dilsey driving Ben and TP back around the corner. We went down the steps and got in. Uncle Maury kept saying, poor little sister, talking around his mouth and patting Mother's hand, talking around whatever it was. Have you got your band on? She says. Why don't they go on before Benjamin comes out and makes a spectacle? Poor little boy, he doesn't know. He can't even realize. There, Uncle Maury says, patting her hand, taking around his mouth. It's better so. Let him be unaware of bereavement until he has to. Other women have their children to support them in times like this, Mother says. You have Jason and me, he says. It's so terrible to me, she says, having the two of them like this in less than 2 years. There, he says. After a while, he kind of sneaked his hand to his mouth and dropped them out the window. Then I knew what I had been smelling. Clove stems. I reckon he thought that the least he could do at Father's funeral, or maybe the sideboard thought it was still Father and tripped him up when he passed. Like I say, if he had to sell something to send Quentin to Harvard, we'd all been a damn sight better off if he'd sold that sideboard and brought himself a one-armed straitjacket with part of the money. I reckon the reason all the Compson gave out before it got to me, like Mother says, is that he drank it up. At least I never heard of him offering to sell anything to send me to Harvard. So he kept on patting her hand and saying, poor little sister. Patting her hand with one of the black gloves that we got the bill for 4 days later because it was the 26th, because it was the same day 1 month that Father went up there and got it and brought it home and wouldn't tell anything about where she was or anything, and Mother crying and saying, and you didn't even see him? You didn't even try to get him to make any provision for it? And Father says, no one shall not touch his money, not 1 cent of it. And Mother says, he can't be forced to by law. He can't prove nothing unless... Jason Compson, she says, were you fool enough to tell... Hush, Caroline, Father says. Then he sent me to help Dilsey get that old cradle out of the attic, and I says, well, they brought my job home tonight. Because all the time we kept hoping they'd get things straightened out and he'd keep her, because Mother kept saying she would at least have enough regard for the family not to jeopardize my chance after she and Quentin had had theirs. And where else do she belong? Dilsey says. Who else gonna raise her except me? Ain't I raised every one of 'em, y'all? And a damn fine job you made of it, I says. Anyways, it'll give her something to sure enough worry over now. So we carried the cradle down, and Dilsey started to set it up in their old room. Then Mother started, sure enough. Hush, Miss Caroline, Dismal says. You gonna wake her up? In there, Mother says, to be contaminated by that atmosphere. It'll be hard enough as it is with the heritage she already has.
Hush, Father says. Don't be silly.
Why ain't she going to sleep in here? Dilsey says. In the same room I put her ma to bed every night of her life, so she was big enough to sleep by herself. You don't know, Mother says, to have my own daughter cast off by her husband. Poor little innocent baby, she says, looking at Quentin. You will never know the suffering you've caused.
Hush, Caroline,
Father says. What you want going like that for, Jason, for? Dilsey says. I've tried to protect him, Mother says. I've always tried to protect him from it. At least I can do my best to shield her.
How's sleeping in this room going to hurt her? I'd like to know, Dilsey says.
I can't help it, Mother says. I know I'm just a troublesome old woman, but I know that people cannot flout God's laws with impunity.
Nonsense, Father said. Fix it in Miss Caroline's room then, Dilsey.
You can say nonsense, Mother says, but she must never know. She must never even learn that name. Dilsey, I forbid you to ever speak that name in her hearing. If she could grow up never to know that she had a mother, I would thank God.
Don't be a fool, Father says.
I have never interfered with the way you brought them up, Mother says, but now I cannot stand any more. We must decide this now, tonight. Either that name never to be spoken her hearing, or she must go, or I will go. Take your choice.
Hush, Father says. You're just upset. Fix it in here, Dilsey.
And you about sick too, Dilsey says. You looks like a haunt. You get in bed and I'll fix you a toddy and see can you sleep. I'll bet you ain't had a full night's sleep since you left. No, Mother says. Don't you know what the doctor says? Why must you encourage him to drink? That's what's the matter with him now. Look at me. I suffer too, but I'm not so weak that I must kill myself with whiskey.
Fiddlesticks, Father says. What do doctors know? They make their living advertising people do whatever they're not doing at the time, which is the extent of anyone's knowledge of the degenerate ape. You'll have a minister in to hold my hand next. Then Mother cried and he went out. Went downstairs, and then I heard the sideboard. I woke up and heard him going down again. Mother had gone to sleep or something because the house was quiet at last. He was trying to be quiet, too, because I couldn't hear him, only the bottom of the nightskirt and his bare legs in front of the sideboard. Dilsey fixed the cradle and undressed her and put her in. She never had waked up since he brought her in the house. She pretty near too big for fit, Dilsey says. Donna, I'll go and spread me a pallet right across the hall so you won't need to get up in the night. I won't sleep, Mother says. You go on home. I won't mind. I'll be happy to give the rest of my life to her if I can just prevent... Hush now, Dilsey says. We gonna take care of her. And you go to bed, too, she says to me. You got school tomorrow. So I went out. Then Mother called me back and cried on me a while. You are my only hope, she says. Every night I thank God for you. While we were waiting there for them to start, she says, thank God, if he had been taken too. It is you left me and not Quentin. Thank God you are not a Compson, because all I have left now is you and Maury. And I says, well, I could spare Uncle Maury myself. Well, he kept on patting her hand with his black glove, talking away from her. He took them off when his turn with the shovel came. He got up near the first, where they were holding the umbrellas over them, stamping every now and then and trying to kick the mud off their feet, and sticking to the shovel so they'd have to knock it off, making a hollow sound when it fell on it. And when I stepped back around the hack, I could see him behind a tombstone, taking another one out of a bottle. I thought he was never going to stop because I had on my new suit too, but it happened that there wasn't much mud on the wheels yet. Only Mother saw it and says I don't know when you'll ever have another one, and Uncle Maury says, now, don't you worry at all. You'll have me to depend on, always. And we have, always. The fourth letter was from him, but there wasn't any need to open it. I could have written it myself or recited it to her from memory, adding $10 just to be safe. But I had a hunch about the other letter. I just felt that it was about time she was up to some of her tricks again. She got pretty wise after that first time. She found out pretty quick that I was a different breed of cat from Father. When they begun to get it filled up toward the top, Mother started crying, sure enough, so Uncle Maury got in with her and drove off. He says you can come in with somebody. They'll be glad to give you a lift. I'll have to take your mother on, and I thought about saying yes. You ought to brought 2 bottles instead of just one, only I thought about where we were, so I let him go on. Little they cared how wet I got, because then Mother could have a whale of a time being afraid I was taking pneumonia. Well, I got to thinking about that and watching them throw dirt into it, slapping it on anyway, like they were making mortar or something, or building a fence, and I began to feel sort of funny, so I decided to walk around a while. I thought that if I went toward town, they'd catch up and be trying to make me get in one of them, so I went on back toward the end graveyard. I got under some cedars where the rain didn't come much, only dripping now and then, where I could see when they got through and went away. After a while, they were all gone, and I waited a minute and came out. I had to follow the path to keep out of the wet grass, so I didn't see her until I was pretty near there, standing there in the black cloak, looking at the flowers. I knew who it was right off before she turned and looked at me and lifted up her veil.
"Hello, Jason," she says, holding out her hand. We shook hands. "What are you doing here?" I says. "I thought you promised her you wouldn't come back here. I thought you had more sense than that." "Yes," she says. She looked at the flowers again. It must have been $50 worth. Somebody had put 1 bunch on Quentin's. "You did?" she says. "I'm not surprised, though," I says. "I wouldn't put anything past you. You don't mind anybody. You don't give a damn about anybody." "Oh," she says, "that job." She looked at the grave. "I'm sorry about that, Jason." "I bet you are," I says. "You talk mighty meek now, but you needn't have come back. There's not anything left. Ask Uncle Maury if you don't believe me." "I don't want anything," she says. She looked at the grave. "Why didn't they let me know?" she says. "I just happened to see it in the paper, on the back page. Just happened to." I didn't say anything. We stood there looking at the grave. And then I got to thinking about when we were little, and one thing and another, and I got to feeling funny again, kind of mad or something, thinking about now we'd have Uncle Maury around the house all the time, running things like the way he left me to come home in the rain by myself. I says, "A fine lot you are, sneaking in here as soon as he's dead. But it won't do you any good. Don't think you could take advantage of this come sneaking back. If you can't stay on the horse you've got, you'll have to walk," I says. "We don't even know your name at the house. Did you know that? We don't even know you with him and Quentin," I says. "Do you know that?" "I know it," she says. "Jason," she says, looking at the grave, "if you'll fix it so I can see her a minute, I'll give you $50. "You haven't got $50, I says. "Will you?" she says, not looking at me. "Let's see it," I says. "I don't believe you've got $50. I could see where her hands were moving under her cloak. Then she held her hand out. Damn if it wasn't full of money. I could see 2 or 3 yellow ones. "Does he still give you money?" I says. "How much does he send you?" "I'll give you 100, she says. "Will you?" "Just a minute," I says. "And just like I say, I wouldn't have her know it for $1,000. "Yes," she says. "Just like you say, you'd do it. Just so I see her a minute. I won't beg or do anything. I'll go right on away." "Give me the money," I says. "I'll give it to you afterward," she says. "Don't you trust me?" I says. "No," she says. "I know you. I grew up with you." You're a fine one to talk about trusting people, I says. Well, I says, I gotta get on out of the rain. Goodbye. I made to go away. Jason, she says. I stopped. Yes? Hurry up, I'm getting wet. All right, she says. Here. There wasn't anybody in sight. I went back and took the money. She still held to it. You'll do it? She says, looking at me from under the veil. You promise? Let go, I says. You want somebody to come along and see us? She let go. I put the money in my pocket. You'll do it, Jason, she says. I wouldn't ask you if there was any other way. You're damn right there's no other way, I says. Sure, I'll do it. I said I would, didn't I? Only you'll just have to do just like I say now. Yes, she says, I will. So I told her where to be and went to the livery stable. I hurried and got there as they were unhitching the hack. I asked if they had paid for it yet, and he said no. And I said Mrs. Compton forgot something and wanted it again, so they let me take it. Mink was driving. I bought him a cigar, so we drove around until it began to get dark on the back streets where they wouldn't see him. Then Mink said he'd have to take the team on back, and so I said I'd buy him another cigar, and so we drove into the lane, and I went across the yard to the house. I stopped in the hall until I could hear Mother and Uncle Maury upstairs, then I went on back to the kitchen. She and Ben were there with Dilsey. I said Mother wanted her, and I took her into the house. I found Uncle Maury's raincoat and put it around her, and picked her up and went back to the lane, and I got in the hack. I told Mink to drive to the depot. He was afraid to pass the stable, so we had to go to the back way, and I saw her standing on the corner under the light, and I told Mink to drive close to the walk. And when I said to go on, give the team a bat. Then I took the raincoat off her and held her to the window, and Caddy saw her and sort of jumped forward. Hit him, Mink, I says. And Mink gave them a cut, and we went past her like a fire engine. Now get on that train like you promised, I says. I could see her running after us through the back window. Hit him again, I says. Let's go on home. When we turned around the corner, she was still running. And so I counted the money again that night and put it away, and I didn't feel so bad. I says, I reckon that'll show you. I reckon you'll know now that you can't beat me out of a job and get away with it. Never occurred to me that she wouldn't keep her promise to take that train, but I didn't know much about them then. I didn't have any more sense than to believe what they said, because the next morning, damn if she didn't walk right into the store, only she had sense enough to wear the veil and not speak to anybody. It was Saturday morning, because I was at the store, and she came right on back to the desk where I was, walking fast. Liar, she says. Liar. Are you crazy? I says. What do you mean coming in here like this? She started in, but I shut her off. I says, you already cost me one job. Do you want me to lose this one too? If you've got anything to say to me, I'll meet you somewhere after dark. What have you got to say to me? I says. Didn't I do everything I said? I said, see her a minute, didn't I? Well, didn't you? She just stood there looking at me, shaking like an ague fit, her hands clenched and kind of jerking. I did just what I said I would, I says. You're the one that lied. You promised to take that train. Didn't you? Didn't you promise? If you think you'd get that money back, just try it, I says. If it had been $1,000, you'd still owe me after the risk I took. And if I see or hear you're still in town after number 17 runs, I says, I'll tell Mother and Uncle Maury. Then hold your breath until you see her again. She just stood there looking at me, twisting her hands together. Damn you, she says. Damn you. Sure, I says. That's all right, too. Mind what I say now after number 17, and I tell 'em. After she was gone, I felt better. I says I reckon you'll think twice before you deprive me of a job that was promised me. I was a kid then. I believed folks when they said they'd do things. I've learned better since. Besides, like I say, I guess I don't need any man's help to get along. I can stand on my own feet like I always have. Then all of a sudden I thought of Dilsey and Uncle Maury. I thought how she'd get around Dilsey and that Uncle Maury'd do anything for $10. And there I was. Couldn't even get away from the store to protect my own mother. Like she says, if one of you had to be taken, thank God it was you left me where I could depend on you. And I says, well, I don't reckon I'll ever get far enough from the store to get out of your reach. Somebody's got to hold on to what little we have left, I reckon. So as soon as I got home, I fixed Dilsey. I told Dilsey she had leprosy,
and I got the Bible and read where a man's flesh rotted off, and I told her that if she ever looked at her or Ben or Quentin, they'd catch it too. So I thought I had everything all fixed until the day when I came home and found Ben bellowing. Raising hell, and nobody could quiet him. Mother said, well, get him the slipper then. Dilsey made out she didn't hear. Mother said it again, and I says, I couldn't stand that damn noise. Like I say, I can't stand lots of things I don't expect much from them, but if I have to work all day long in a damn store, damn if I don't think I deserve a little peace and quiet to eat a dinner in. So I says, I go, and Dilsey says, quick, Jason. Well, like a flash, I knew what was up. Just to make sure, I went and got the slipper and brought it back, and just like I thought, when he saw it, you'd thought we were killing him. So I made Dilsey own up, and then I told Mother. We had to take her up to bed then, and after things got quieted down a little, I put the fear of God into Dilsey. As much as you can into an inn, that is. That's the trouble with inn servants. When they've been with you for a long time, they get so full of self-importance that they're not worth a damn. They think they run the whole family. I'd like to know what's the hurt in letting the poor child see her own baby, Dilsey says. If Mr. Jason was still here, you'd be different. Only Mr. Jason's not here, I says. I know you won't pay me any mind, but I reckon you'll do what Mother says. You keep on worrying her like this until you get her into the graveyard, too. Then you can fill the whole house full of ragtail and bobtail. But what did you want to let that damn idiot see her for? You's a cold man, Jason, if you man you is, she says. I thank the Lord I got more heart than that, even if it is black. At least I'm man enough to keep that flour barrel full, I says. And if you do that again, you won't be eating out of it either. So the next time I told her that if she tried Dilsey again, Mother was going to fire Dilsey and send Ben to Jackson and take Quentin and go away. She looked at me for a while. There wasn't any street light close, and I couldn't see her face much, but I could feel her looking at me. When we were little, when she'd get mad and couldn't do anything about it, her upper lip would begin to jump. Every time it jumped, it would leave a little more of her teeth showing, and all the time she'd be as still as a post, not a muscle moving except her lip jerking higher and higher up her teeth. But she didn't say anything. She just said, all right. How much? Well, if one look through a hack window was worth 100, I says. So after that she behaved pretty well. Only one time she asked to see a statement of the bank account. I know they have Mother's endorsement on them, she says, but I want to see the bank statement. I want to see myself where those checks go. That's in Mother's private business, I says. If you think you have any right to pry into her private affairs, I'll tell you you believe those checks are being misappropriated and you want an audit because you don't trust her. She didn't say anything or move. I could hear her whispering, damn you, oh damn you, oh damn you. Say it out, I says. I don't reckon it's any secret what you and I think of one another. Maybe you want the money back, I says. Listen, Jason, she says. Don't lie to me now. About her. I won't ask to see anything, if that isn't enough. I'll send more each month. Just promise that you can do that. Things for her. Be kind to her. Little things that I can't. They won't let. But you won't. You never had a drop of warm blood in you. Listen, she said. If you'll get Mother to let me have her back, I'll give you $1,000. You haven't got $1,000, says. I know you're lying now. Yes, I have. I will have. I can get it. And I know how you'll get it, I says. You'll get it the same way you got her, and when she gets big enough. Then I thought she really was going to hit me. And then I didn't know what she was going to do. She acted for a minute like some kind of toy that's wound up too tight and about to burst all to pieces. Oh, I'm crazy, she says. I'm insane. I can't take her. Keep her. What am I thinking of, Jason? She says, grabbing my arm. Her hands were as hot as fever. You'll have to promise to take care of her, too. She's kin to you, your own flesh and blood. Promise, Jason. You have Father's name. Do you think I'd have to ask him twice? Once, even? That's so, I says. He did leave me something. What do you want me to do? I says. Buy an apron and a go-kart? I never got you into this, I says. I run more risk than you do because you haven't got anything at stake. So if you expect... No, she says. Then she began to laugh and try to hold it back all at the same time. No, I have nothing at stake, she says, making that noise, putting her hands to her mouth. Nothing, she says.
Here, I says, stop that.
I'm trying, she says, holding her hands over. Oh, God. Oh, God.
I'm going away from here. I says, I can't be seen here. You get on out of town now, you hear?
Wait, she says, catching my arm. I've stopped. I won't again. You promise, Jason? She says, and me feeling her eyes almost like they were touching my face. You promise? Mother, that money, if sometimes she needs things, if I send checks for her to you, other ones besides those, you'll give them to her? You won't tell? You'll see that she has things like other girls?
Sure, I says, as long as you behave and do like I tell you.
And so when Earl came up front with his hat on, he says, I'm going to step up to Rogers and get a snack. Won't have time to go to dinner, I reckon.
What's the matter we won't have time? I says.
With this show in town and all, he says. They're going to give an afternoon performance, too, and they'll all want to get done trading in time to go to it. So we better just run up to Rogers.
All right, I says. It's your stomach. If you want to make a slave of yourself to your business, it's all right with me.
I reckon you'll never be a slave to any business, he says.
Not unless it's a Jason Compson's business, I says.
So when I went back and opened it, the only thing that surprised me was a money order, not a check. Yes, sir, you can't trust a one of them. After all the risk I'd taken, risking Mother finding out about her coming down here once or twice a year sometimes, and me telling her mother lies about it, that's gratitude for you. And I wouldn't put it past her to try to notify the post office not to let anyone except her cash it. Giving a kid like that $50. Why, I never saw $50 until I was 21 years old, with all the other boys the afternoon off and all day Saturday and me working in a store. Like I say, how can they expect anybody to control her with her giving her money behind our backs? She has the same home you had, I says, with the same reason. I reckon Mother's a better judge of what she needs than you are. Haven't even got a home.
If you want to give her money, I says, you send it to Mother. Don't be giving it to her. If I've got to run this risk every few months, you'll have to do like I say, or it's out.
And just about the time I got ready to begin on it, because if Earl thought I was going to dash up the street and gobble up 2 bits worth of indigestion on his account, he was bad fooled. I may not be sitting with my feet on a mahogany desk, but I am being paid for what I do inside this building, and if I can't manage to live a civilized life outside of it, I'll go where I can. I can stand on my own feet. I don't need any man's mahogany desk to prop me up. So just about the time I got ready to start, I'd have to drop everything and run to sell some redneck a dime's worth of nails or something, and Earl up there gobbling a sandwich and a half way back already, like as not. Then I found that all the blanks were gone. I remembered then that I had aimed to get some more, but it was too late now, and then I looked up, and there Quentin came, in the back door. I heard her asking old Job if I was there. I just had time to stick them in the drawer and close it. She came around to the desk. I looked at my watch.
You been to dinner already? It says. It's just 12. I just heard it strike. You must have flown home and back.
I'm not going home to dinner,
she says. Did I get a letter today? Were you expecting one? I says. Have you got a sweetie that can write?
From Mother, she says. Did I get a letter from Mother? She says, looking at me.
Mother got one from her. I says, I haven't opened it. You'll have to wait until she opens it. She'll let you see it, I imagine.
Please, Jason, she says, not paying attention. Did I get one?
What's the matter? I says. I never knew you to be anxious about anybody. You must expect some money from her.
She said she says. Please, Jason, she says. Did I?
You must have been to school today after all, I says. Somewhere they taught you to say please. Wait a minute while I wait on that customer.
I went and waited on him. When I turned to come back, she was out of sight behind the desk. I ran. I ran around the desk and caught her as she jerked her hand out of the drawer. I took the letter away from her, beating her knuckles on the desk until she let go.
You would you?
Give it to me, she says.
You've already opened it. Give it to me, Jason. Jason, please. It's mine. I saw the name. I'll take a hamstring to you, I says. That's what I'll give you, going into my papers. Is there some money in it? She says, reaching for it. She said she would send me some money. She promised she would. Give it to me. What do you want with money? I says. She said she would. She says, give it to me. Please, Jason. I won't ever ask you anything again if you'll give it to me this time. I'm going to if you'll give me time, I says. I took the letter and the money order out and gave her the letter. She reached for the money order, not hardly glancing at the letter. You'll have to sign it first, I says. How much is it? She says. Read the letter, I says. I reckon it'll say. She read it fast in about 2 looks. It don't say, she says, looking up. She dropped the letter to the floor. How much is it? It's $10, I says. $10, she says, staring at me. And you ought to be damn glad to get that, I says. A kid like you. What are you in such a rush for money for all of a sudden? $10, she says, like she was talking in her sleep. Just $10? She made a grab at the money order. You're lying, she says. Thief, she says. Thief! You would you? I says, holding her off. Give it to me, she says. It's mine. She sent it to me. I will see it. I will. You will, I says, holding her. How are you going to do it? Just let me see it, Jason, she says. Please, I won't ask you for anything again. Think I'm lying, do you? I says. Just for that you won't see it. But just $10, she says. She told me. Jason, please, please, please. I've got to have some money. I've just got to. Give it to me, Jason. I'll do anything if you will. Tell me what you've got to have money for, I says. I've got to have it, she says. She was looking at me. Then all of a sudden she quit looking at me without moving her eyes at all. I knew she was going to lie. It's some money I owe, she said. I've got to pay it. I've got to pay it today. Who to? I says. Her hands were sort of twisting. I could watch her trying to think of a lie to tell. Have you been charging things at stores again? I says. You needn't bother to tell me that. If you can find anybody in this town that'll charge anything to you after what I told them, I'll eat it. It's a girl, she says. It's a girl. I borrowed some money from a girl. I've got to pay it back. Jason, give it to me, please. I'll do anything. I've got to have it. Mother will pay you. I'll write to her to pay you, and that I won't ever ask for anything again. You can see the letter. Please, Jason, I've got to have it. Tell me what you want with it, and I'll see about it, I says. Tell me. She just stood there with her hands working against her dress. All right, I says. If $10 is too little for you, I'll just take it home to Mother, and you know what'll happen to it then. Of course, if you're so rich, you don't need $10. She stood there looking at the floor, kind of mumbling to herself. She said she would send me some money. She says she sends money here and says she don't send any. She says she sent a lot of money here. She says it's for me, that it's for me to have some of it. And you say we haven't got any money. You know as much about that as I do, I says. You've seen what happens to those checks. Yes, she says, looking at the floor. $10, she says. $10. And you'd better thank your stars it's $10, I says. Here, I says. I put the money order face down on the desk, holding my hand on it. Sign it. Will you let me see it? She says. I just want to look at it. Whatever it says, I won't ask you for but $10. You can have the rest. I just want to see it. Not after the way you've acted, I says. You've got to learn one thing, and that is that when I tell you to do something, you have got to do it. You sign your name on that line. She took the pen, but instead of signing it, she just stood there with her head bent and the pen shaking in her hand, just like her mother. Oh, God, she says. Oh, God. Yes, I says. That's the one thing you'll have to learn if you never learn anything else. Sign it now and get on out of here. She signed it. Where's the money? She says. I took the order and blotted it and put it in my pocket. Then I gave her the $10. Now you won't go on back to school this afternoon, you hear? I says. She didn't answer. She crumpled the bill up in her hand like it was a rag or something and went on out the front door, just as Earl came in. Customer came in with him and stepped up front. I gathered up the things and put my hat and went up front.
Been much busy? Earl says.
Not much,
I says. He looks out the door. Not your car over yonder, he says. Better not try to go out home to dinner. We'll likely have another rush just before the show opens. Get you a lunch at Rogers. Put a ticker in the drawer.
Much obliged, I says. I can still manage to feed myself, I reckon.
And right there he'd stay, watching that door like a hawk until I came through it again. Well, he'd just have to watch it for a while. I was doing the best I could. The time before, I says, that's the last one now. You'll have to remember to get some more right away. But who can remember anything in all this hurrah? Now this damn show had to come here. The one day I'd have to hunt all over town for a blank check. Besides all the other things I had to do to keep the house running. And Earl watching the door like a hawk. I went to the printing shop and told him I wanted to play a joke on a fellow, but he didn't have anything. Then he told me to have a look in the old opera house, where somebody had stored a lot of papers and junk out of the old Merchant and Farmers Bank when it had failed. So I dodged up a few more alleys so Earl couldn't see me and finally found old man Simmons. Got the key from him and went up there and dug around. At last I found a pad on a St. Louis bank, and of course she'd picked this one time to look at it close. Well, it would have to do. I couldn't waste any more time now. I went back to the store.
Forgot some papers. Mother wants to go to the bank, I says.
I went back to the desk and fixed the check. Trying to hurry and all, I says to myself, it's a good thing her eyes are going out with that little whore in the house. Christian, forbearing woman like Mother. I says, you know just as well as I do what she's going to grow up into, but I says that's your business. If you want to keep her and raise her in your house just because of Father. Then she would begin to cry and say it was her own flesh and blood, so I just says, all right. Have it your way. I can stand it if you can. I fixed the letter up again and glued it back and went out. Try not to be gone any longer than you can help, Earl says.
All right,
I says. I went to the telegraph office. The smart boys were all there.
Any of you boys made $1 million yet?
I says. Who can do anything with a market like that? Doc says.
What's it doing?
I says. I went in and looked. It was 3 points under the opening.
You boys are not going to let a little thing like the cotton market beat you, are you? I says. I thought you were too smart for that.
Smart, hell, Doc says. It was down 12 points at 12 o'clock. Clean me out.
12 points, I says. Why the hell didn't somebody let me know? Why didn't you let me know? I says to the operator. I take it as it comes in, he says. I'm not running a bucket shop. You're smart, aren't you? I says. Seems to me, with the money I spend with you, you could take the time to call me up. Or maybe your damn company's in a conspiracy with those damn Eastern sharks.
He didn't say anything. He made like he was busy.
You're getting a little too big for your pants, I says. First thing you know, you'll be working for a living.
What's the matter with you? Doc says. You're still 3 points to the good.
Yes, I says. If I happen to be selling. I haven't mentioned that yet, I think. You boys all cleaned out?
I got caught twice, Doc says. I switched just in time. Well, I.O. Snope said, I picked it. I reckon 'tain't no more than fair for it to pick me once in a while. So I left them buying and selling among themselves at a nickel a point. I found an inn and sent him for my car and stood on the corner and waited. I couldn't see Earl looking up and down the street with one eye on the clock because I couldn't see the door from here. After about a week, he got back with it.
Where the hell have you been? I says, riding around where the winches could see you.
I come straight as I could, he says. I had to drive clean around the square. We all them wagons. I never found an inn yet that didn't have an airtight alibi for whatever he did. But just turn one loose in a car, and he's bound to show off. I again and went off around the square. I caught a glimpse of Earl in the door across the square. I went straight to the kitchen and told Dilsey to hurry up with dinner. Quentin ain't come yet, she says.
What of that? I says. You'll be telling me next that Luster's not quite ready to eat yet. Quentin knows when meals are served in this house. Hurry up with it now.
Mother was in her room. I gave her the letter. She opened it and took the check out and sat holding it in her hand. I went and got the shovel from the corner and gave her a match.
Come on, I says. Get it over with. You'll be crying in a minute.
She took the match, but she didn't strike it. She sat there looking at the check, just like I said it would be.
I hate to do it, she says, to increase your burden by adding Quentin. I guess we'll get along. I says, come on, get it over with.
But she just sat there holding the check.
This one's from a different bank, she says. They have been on an Indianapolis bank. Yes, I says, women are allowed to do that too. Do what? She says, keep money in 2 different banks. I says, oh, she says. She looks at the check a while. I'm glad to know she has so much. God sees that I'm doing right, she says. Come on, I says, finish it. Get the fun over. Fun? She says, when I think. I thought you were burning this $200 a month for fun, I says. Come on now, want me to strike that match? I could bring myself to accepting, she says, for my children's sake. I have no pride. You'd never be satisfied, I says. You know you wouldn't. You've settled that once. Let it stay settled. We can get along. I leave everything to you, she says, but sometimes I become afraid that in doing this I'm depriving you all of what's rightfully yours. Perhaps I shall be punished for it. And if you want me to, I will smother my pride and accept them. What would be the good in beginning now when you've been destroying them for 15 years? I says. If you keep on doing it, you have lost nothing. But if you begin to take them now, you'll have lost $15,000. We've got along so far, haven't we? I says. I haven't seen you in the poorhouse yet. Yes, she says, we Bascombs need nobody's charity. Certainly not that of a fallen woman. She struck the match and lit the check and put it in the shovel, and then the envelope, and watched them burn. You don't know what it is, she says. Thank God you will never know what a mother feels. There are lots of women in this world, no better than her, I says. But they are not my daughters, she says. It's not for myself, she says. I'd gladly take her back, sins and all, because she is my flesh and blood. It's for Quentin's sake. Well, I could have said it wasn't much chance of anybody hurting Quentin much, but like I say, I don't expect much, but I do want to eat and sleep without a couple of women squabbling and crying in the house. And yours, she says. I know how you feel toward her. Let her come back, I says, far as I'm concerned. No, she says, I owe that to your father's memory. When he was trying all the time to persuade you to let her come home when Herbert threw her out, I says. You don't understand, she says. I know you don't intend to make it more difficult for me, but it's my place to suffer for my children, she says. I can bear it. Seems to me you go to a lot of unnecessary trouble doing it, I says. The paper burned out. I carried it to the grate and put it in. It's just a shame to me to burn up good money, I says. Let me never see the day when my children will have to accept that. The wages of sin, she says. I'd rather see even you dead in your coffin first. Have it your way, I says. Are we going to have dinner soon? I says, because if we're not, I'll have to go on back. We're pretty busy today. She got up. I've told her once, it says. It seems she's waiting on Quentin or Luster or somebody. Here, I'll call her. Wait. But she went on to the head of the stairs and called. Quentin ain't come yet, Dilsey says. Well, I'll have to get on back, I says. I can get a sandwich downtown. I don't want to interfere with Dilsey's arrangements, I says. Well, that got her started again, with Dilsey hobbling and mumbling back and forth, saying, all right, it's a putting a hit on fast as I can. I try to please you all, Mother says. I try to make things as easy for you as I can. I'm not complaining, am I says. Have I said a word except that I had to go back to work? I know, she says. I know you haven't had the chance that others have, that you had to bury yourself in a little country store. I wanted you to get ahead. I knew your father would never realize that you were the only one who had any business sense. And then when everything else failed, I believed that when she married, and Herbert, after his promise. Well, he was probably lying too, I says. He may not even have had a bank, and if he had, I don't reckon he'd have come all the way to Mississippi to get a man for it.
We ate a while. I could hear Ben in the kitchen where Luster was feeding him. Like I say, if we got to feed another mouth and she won't take that money, why not send him down to Jackson? He'd be happier there with people like him. I says, God knows there's little enough room for pride in this family. But it don't take much pride to not see that 30-year-old man playing around the yard with an in-boy running up and down the fence and lowing like a cow whenever they play golf over there. I says, if they'd sent him to Jackson at first, we'd all be better off today. I says, you've done your duty by him. You've done all anybody can expect of you, and more than most folks would do, so why not send him there and get that much benefit out of the taxes we pay? Then she says, I'll be gone soon. I know I'm just a burden to you. And I says, you've been saying that so long that I'm beginning to believe you. Only I says, you'd better be sure and not let me know you're gone, because I'll sure have him on number 17 that night. And I says, I think I know a place where they'll take her, too, and the name of it's not Milk Street and Honey Avenue, either. And she began to cry, and I always say, all right, I have as much pride about my kinfolks as anybody, even if I don't always know where they come from. We ate for a while. Mother sent Dilsey to the front to look for Quentin again. I keep telling you she's not coming to dinner, I says. She knows better than that, Mother says. She knows I don't permit her to run around the streets and not come home at mealtime. Did you look good, Dilsey? Don't let her, then, I says. What can I do? You have all of you flouted me, always. If you wouldn't come interfering, I'd make her mind, I says. It wouldn't take me but about 1 day to straighten her out. You'd be too brutal with her, she says. You have your Uncle Maury's temper. That reminded me of the letter. I took it out and handed it to her. You won't have to open it, I says. The bank will let you know how much it is this time. It's addressed to you, she says. Go on and open it, I says. She opened it and read it and handed it to me. My dear young nephew, it says, you will be glad to learn that I am now in a position to avail myself of an opportunity regarding which, for reasons which I shall make obvious to you, I shall not go into details until I have an opportunity to divulge it to you in a more secure manner. My business experience has taught me to be chary of committing anything of confidential nature to any more concrete medium than speech, and my extreme precaution in this instance should give you some inkling of its value. Needless to say, I have just completed a most exhaustive examination of all its phases, and I feel no hesitancy in telling you it is the sort of golden chance that comes but once in a lifetime, and I now see clearly before me that goal toward which I have long and unflaggingly striven, i.e., the ultimate solidification of my affairs by which I will restore to the rightful position that family of which I have the honor to be the sole remaining male descendant, that family in which I have included your lady mother and her children. And so it happens, I am not quite in a position to avail myself of this opportunity to the utmost which it warrants, but rather than go out of the family to do so, I am today drawing upon your mother's bank for a small sum necessary to complement my own initial investment, for which I herewith enclose, as a matter of formality, my note of hand at 8% per annum. Needless to say, this is merely a formality to secure your mother in the event of the circumstance of which man is ever the plaything and sport. For naturally I shall employ the sum as though it were my own, and so permit your mother to avail herself of this opportunity, which my exhaustive investigation has shown to be a bonanza, if you will permit the vulgarism, of the first water and purest ray serene. This is in confidence, you will understand, from one businessman to another. We will harvest our own vineyards, And knowing your mother's delicate health and that timorous which such delicately nurtured southern ladies would naturally feel regarding matters of business, and their charming proneness to divulge unwittingly such matters in conversation, I would suggest that you do not mention it to her at all. On second thought, I advise you not to do so. It might be better to simply restore this sum to the bank at some future date, say, in a lump sum with the other small sums for which I am indebted to her, and say nothing about it at all. It is our duty to shield her from the crass material world as much as possible. Your affectionate uncle, Maury L. Bascom.
What do you want to do about it?
I says, flipping it across the table.
I know you grudge what I give him, she says. It's your money, I says. If you want to throw it to the birds even, it's your business. He's my own brother, Mother says. He's the last Bascom. When we are gone, there won't be any more of them. That'll be hard on somebody, I guess, I says. All right, I says. It's your money. Do as you please with it. You want me to tell the bank to pay it? I know you begrudge him, she says. I realize the burden on your shoulders. When I'm gone, it will be easier on you. I could make it easier right now, I says. All right. I won't mention it again. Move all bedlam in here if you want to. He's your own brother, she says, even if he is afflicted. I'll take your bank book, I says. I'll draw my check today. He kept you waiting 6 days, she says. Are you sure the business is sound? Seems strange to me that a solvent business cannot pay its employees promptly. He's all right, I says, safe as a bank. I tell him not to bother about mine until we get done collecting every month. That's why it's late sometimes. I just couldn't bear to have you lose the little I have to invest for you, she says. I've often thought that Earl's not a good businessman. I know he doesn't take you into his confidence to the extent that your investment in the business should warrant. I'm going to speak to him. No, you let him alone, I says. It's his business. You have $1,000 in it. You let him alone, he says. I'm watching things. I have your power of attorney. It'll be all right. You don't know what a comfort you are to me, she says. You have always been my pride and joy, but when you came to me of your own accord, insisting on banking your salary each month in my name, I thank God it was you left me if they had to be taken. They were all right, I says. They did the best they could, I reckon. When you talk that way, I know you're thinking bitterly of your father's memory, she says. You have a right to, I suppose, but it breaks my heart to hear you. I got up. If you've got any crying to do, I says, you'll have to do it alone, because I've got to get on back. I'll get the bank book. I'll get it, she says. Keep still, I says. I'll get it. I went upstairs and got the bank book out of her desk and went back to town. I went to the bank, deposited the check and the money order and the other 10, and stopped at the telegraph office. It was 1 point above the opening. I had already lost 13 points, all because she had come helling in there at 12, worrying me about that letter. What time did that report come in? I says. About an hour ago, he says. An hour ago? I says, what are we paying you for? I says, weekly reports? How do you expect a man to do anything? The whole damn top could blow off and we'd not know it. I don't expect you to do anything, he says. They changed that law making folks play the cotton market. They have? I says. I hadn't heard. They must have sent the news out over the Western Union. I went back to the store. 13 points. Damn if I believe anybody knows anything about the damn things except the ones that sit there back in New York offices and watch the country suckers come up and beg them to take their money. Well, a man that just calls shows he has no faith in himself. And like I say, if you aren't going to take the advice, what's the use in paying money for it? Besides, these people are right up there on the ground. They know everything that's going on. I could feel the telegram in my pocket. I'd just have to prove that they were using the telegraph company to defraud. That would constitute a bucket shop. And I wouldn't hesitate that long either. Only be damned if it doesn't look like the company as big and rich as Western Union could get a market report out on time. Half as quick as they'll get a wire to you saying your account closed out. But what the hell do they care about the people? They're hand in glove with that New York crowd. Anybody could see that. When I came in, Earl looked at his watch, but he didn't say anything until the customer was gone. Then he says, "You go home for dinner?" "I had to go to the dentist," I say, because it's not any of his business where I eat, but I've got to be in the store with him all the afternoon. And with his jaw running off after all, I've stood. You take a little 2x4 country storekeeper, like I say, it takes a man with just $500 to worry about it, $50,000 worth. You might have told me, he says. I expected you back right away. I'll trade you this tooth and give you $10 to boot any time, I says. Our argument was an hour for dinner. Our agreement, I says. And if you don't like the way I do, you know what you could do about it. I've known that some time, he says. If it hadn't been for your mother, I'd have done it before now. She's a lady I got sympathy for, Jason. Too bad some other folks I know can't say as much. Then you can keep it, I says. When we need sympathy, I'll let you know in plenty of time. I protected you about that business a long time, Jason. Yes, I says, letting him go on, listening to what he would say before I shut him up. I believe I know about where that audible came from than she does. You think so, do you? I says. When are you going to spread that news that I stole it from my mother? I don't say anything, he says. I know you have her power of attorney, and I know she still believes that $1,000 is in this business. All right, I says. Since you know so much, I'll tell you a little more. Go to the bank and ask them whose account I've been depositing $160 on the first of every month for 12 years. I don't say anything, he says. I just ask you to be a little more careful after this. I never said anything more. It doesn't do any good. I found that when a man gets into his rut, the best thing to do is let him stay there. And when a man gets into his head that he's got to tell something on you for your own good, good night. I'm glad I haven't got the sort of conscience I've got to nurse like a sick puppy all the time. If I'd ever be as careful over anything as he is to keep his little shirt tail full of business from making him more than 8%, I reckon he thinks they get him on the usury law if he's netted more than 8%. What the hell chances a man got tied down in a town like this and do a business like this? Why, I could take his business in 1 year and fix him so he'd never have to work again, only he'd give it all away to the church or something. If there's one thing gets under my skin, it's a damn hypocrite. A man that thinks anything he don't understand all about must be crooked, and that first chance he gets he's morally bound to tell the third party what none of his business to tell. Like I say, if I thought every time a man did something I didn't know all about he was bound to be a crook, I reckon I wouldn't have any trouble finding something back there on those books that you wouldn't see any use for running and telling somebody I thought ought to know about it. When for all I knew, they might know a damn sight more about it now than I did, and if they didn't, it was damn little of my business anyway. And he says, my books are open to anybody. Anybody that has any claim, or believes she has any claim on this business, go back there and welcome. Sure, you won't tell. It says, you couldn't square your conscience with that? You'll just take her back and let her find it? You won't tell yourself. I'm not trying to meddle in your business, he says. I know you missed out on some things like Quentin had, but your mother had had a misfortunate life too. And she was to come in here and ask me why you quit. I'd have to tell her. It ain't that $1,000, you know that. It's because a man never gets anything, anywhere. In fact, and his ledgers don't square. And I'm not going to lie to anybody, for myself or anybody else. Well then, I says, I reckon that your conscience of yours is a more valuable clerk than I am. You don't have to go at home at noon to eat. Only don't let it interfere with my appetite, I says. Because how the hell can I do anything right with that Dan family and her not making any effort to control her nor any of them? Like that time when she happened to see one of them kissing Caddy all next day, and she went around the house in a black dress and a veil, and even Father couldn't get her to say a word except crying and saying her little daughter was dead, and Caddy, about 15, that only in 3 years she'd been wearing haircloth or probably sandpaper at that rate. You think I can afford to have her running about the streets with every drummer that comes to town, I says? And then telling the new ones up and down the road where to pick up a hot one when they made Jefferson? I haven't got much pride. I can't afford it with the kitchen full of ends to feed and robbing the state asylum of its star freshman. Blood, I says. Governors and generals. It's a damn good thing we never had any kings and presidents. We'd all be down there at Jackson chasing butterflies. I say it'd be bad enough if it was mine. I'd at least be sure if it was a bastard to begin with, and now even the Lord doesn't know that for certain, probably. So after a while, I heard the band start up, and then they began to clear out. Headed for the show, every one of them, haggling over a 20-cent hamstring to save 15 cents so they can give it to a bunch of Yankees that come in and pay maybe $10 for the privilege. I went on out to the back. "Well," I says, "if you don't look out, that bolt will grow in your hand, and then I'm going to take an axe and chop it off. What do you reckon the boll weevers will eat if you don't get those cultivators in shape to raise them a crop?" I says, "Sage grass?"
"Dem folks sure do play dem horns," he says. "Tell that man in that show dem play the tune on a handsaw. Play it like a banjo."
"Listen," I says, "do you know how much that show will spend in this town? About $10. I says, "the $10 Buck Turpin has in his pocket right now."
"What they give Mr. Buck $10 for?"
He says, "For the privilege of showing here." I say, "You can put the balance of what they'll spend in your eye."
"You mean they pay $10 just to show their show here?"
He says. "That's all," I says. "And how much do you reckon?"
"Great day," he says. "You mean to tell me they charging them to let them show here? I paid $10 to see that man pick the song, if I had to. I figures that tomorrow morning I'll still be owing them $9.06 at that rate."
And then a Yankee will talk your head off about ins getting ahead. Get 'em ahead, what I say. Get 'em so far ahead you can't find one south of Louisville with a bloodhound. Because when I told him about how they pick up Saturday night and carry off at least $1,000 out of the county, he says,
"I don't begrudge 'em. I can show for my 2 bits."
"2 bits, hell," I says. "They don't begin it. How about a dime or 15 cents you'll spend for a damn 2-cent box of candy or something? How about the time you're wasting right now listening to that band?"
"That's the truth," he says. "Well, if I lives 12 nights, it's going to be 2 bits more day taking day out of town, that's sure."
"Then you're a fool," I says.
"Well," he says, "I'll spoot that neither. If that is a crime, all chain gangs wouldn't be black."
Well, just about that time, I happened to look up the alley and saw her. When I stepped back and looked at my watch and didn't notice at the time who he was because I was looking at the watch, it was just 2:30, 45 minutes before anybody but me expected her to be out. So when I looked around the door, the first thing I saw was the red tie he had on. And I was thinking, what the hell kind of man would wear a red tie? But she was sneaking along the alley watching the door, so I wasn't thinking anything about him until they'd gone past. I was wondering if she'd have so little respect for me that she'd not only play out of school when I told her not to, but walk right past the store, daring me not to see her, only she couldn't see into the door because the sun fell straight into it, and it was like trying to see through an automobile searchlight. So I stood there and watched her go on past with her face painted up like a damn clown's and all her hair all gummed and twisted in a dress that if a woman had come outdoors, even on Gayoso or Beale Street, when I was a young fellow, with no more than that to cover her legs and behind, she'd be thrown in jail. I'll be damned if they don't dress like this, like they were trying to make every man they passed on the street want to reach out and clap his hand on it. And so I was thinking, what kind of damn man would wear a red tie when all of a sudden I knew he was one of those show folks, as if she'd told me. Well, I can stand a lot if I couldn't. Damned if I wouldn't be in a hell of a fix. So they turned the corner. I jumped down and followed. Me, without any hat, in the middle of an afternoon, having to chase up and down back alleys because of my mother's good name. Like I say, you can't do anything with a woman like that if she's got it in her. If it's in her blood, you can't do anything with her. The only thing you can do is get rid of her. Let her go on and live her own sort. I went on to the street, but they were out of sight. And there I was, without any hat, looking like I was crazy too. Like a man would naturally think. One of them is crazy and another one drowned himself, and the other one was turned out into the street by her husband. What's the reason the rest of them are not crazy too? All the time, I could see them watching me like a hawk, waiting for a chance to say, well, I'm not surprised. I expected it all the time. The whole family's crazy. Selling land to send him to Harvard and paying taxes to support a state university all the time that I never saw except twice at a baseball game, and not letting her daughter's name be spoken on the place until after a while father wouldn't even come downtown anymore, but just sat there all day with the decanter. I could see the bottom of his nightshirt and his bare legs and hear the decanter clinking until finally T.P. had to pour it out for him, and she says, "You have no respect for your father's memory." And I says, "I don't know. Why not? It sure is preserved well enough to last only if I'm crazy too. God knows what I'll do about it. Just look at the water. Makes me sick. just as soon as I swallow gasoline as a glass of whiskey, and Lorraine telling me he may not drink, but if you don't believe he's a man, I can tell you how to find out, she says. If I catch you fooling with any of those whores, you know what I'll do, she says. I'll whip her grabbing at her. I'll whip her as long as I can find her, she says. And I says, if I don't drink, that's my business, but if you ever found me short, I says, I'll buy you enough beer to take a bath in if you want it, because I've got every respect for a good, honest whore, because with Mother's health and the position I try to uphold, to have her with no more respect for what I try to do for her than her to make her name and my mother's name a byword in town. She had dodged out of sight somewhere, saw me coming and dodged into another alley, running up and down the alleys with the damn showman in a red tie that everybody would look at and think, what kind of damn man would wear a red tie? Well, boy kept speaking to me, so I took the telegram without knowing I had taken it. I didn't realize what it was until I was signing for it, and I tore it open without even caring much what it was. I knew all the time what it would be, I reckon. That was the only thing that could happen, especially holding it up until I already had the check entered on the passbook. I don't see how a city no bigger than New York can hold enough people to take the money away from all of us country suckers. Work like hell all day, every day. Send them your money and get a little piece of paper back. Your account closed at 2062. Teasing you along, letting you pile a little paper profit, then bang! Your account closed at 2062. And if that wasn't enough, paying $10 a month to somebody to tell you how to lose it fast. That either don't know anything about it or is in cahoots with the telegraph company. Well, I'm done with them. They sucked me in for the last time. Any fool except a fellow that hasn't got any more sense than take a Jew's word for anything could tell the market was going up all the time, with the whole damn Delta about to be flooded again and the cotton washed right out of the ground like it was last year. Let it wash a man's crop out of the ground year after year, and them up in Washington spending $50,000 a day keeping an army in Nicaragua or someplace, or of course it'll overflow again. And then cotton will be worth 30 cents a pound. Well, I just want to hit him one time and get my money back. I don't want to kill him. Only these small-town gamblers are out for that. I just want my money back that these damn Jews have gotten with all their guaranteed inside dope. Then I'm through. They can kiss my foot for every other red cent of mine they got. I went back to the store. It was almost 3:30. Damn little time to do anything in, but then I'm used to that. I never had to go to Harvard to learn that. The band had quit playing. Got 'em all inside now, and they wouldn't have to waste any more wind. Earl says, "You found you, did it? You was in here a little while with it. Thought you were out back somewhere." "Yes," I said, "I got it. They couldn't keep it away from me all afternoon. Town's too small. I gotta go out home a minute," I says. "You can dock me if it'll make you feel any better." "Go ahead," he says. "I can handle it now. No bad news, I hope." "You'll have to go to the telegraph office to find that out," I says. "They'll have time to tell you. I haven't." "I'll just ask," he says. "Your mother knows she can depend on me." "She'll appreciate it," I says. "I won't be gone any longer than I have to." "Take your time," he says. "I can handle it now. You go ahead." I got the car and went home. Once this morning, twice at noon, and now again, with her, and having to chase all over town, and having them to beg them to let me eat a little of the food I'm paying for. Sometimes I think, what's the use of anything? With the precedent I've been set, I must be crazy to keep on. And now I reckon I'll get home just in time to take a nice long drive after a basket of tomatoes or something, and then have to go back to town smelling like a camphor factory so my head won't explode right on my shoulders. I keep telling her there's not a damn thing in that aspirin except flour and water for imaginary invalids. I says, "You don't know what a headache is." I says, "You think I'd fool with that damn car if it depended on me?" I says, "I can get along without one. I've learned to get along without lots of things, but if you want to risk yourself in that old worn-out Surrey with a half-grown in-boy, all right, because I says God looks after you. Looks after Ben's kind. God knows he ought to do something for him, but you think I'm going to trust $1,000 worth of delicate machinery to a half-grown in or a grown one either? You better buy him one yourself, because I said you'd like to ride in the car, and you know you do." Dilsey said Mother was in the house.
I went on to the hall and listened, but I didn't hear anything. I went upstairs, but just as I passed her door, she called me.
I just wanted to know who it was, she says. I'm here alone so much that I hear every sound. You don't have to stay here, I says. You could spend the whole day visiting like other women if you wanted to. She came to the door. I thought maybe you was sick, she says, having to hurry through your dinner like you did. Better luck next time, I says. What do you want? Is anything wrong? She says. What could be? I says. Can't I come home in the middle of an afternoon without upsetting the whole house? Have you seen Quentin? She says. She's in school, I says. It's after 3, she says. I heard the clock strike at least half an hour ago. She ought to be home by now. Ought she? I says. When have you ever seen her before dark? She ought to be home, she says. When I was a girl, you had somebody to make you behave yourself, I says. She hasn't. I can't do anything with her, she says. I've tried and I've tried, and you won't let me for some reason, I says. So you ought to be satisfied.
I went on to my room. I turned the key easy and stood there until the knob turned. Then she says, Jason.
What?
I says.
I just thought there was something wrong.
Not in here, I says. You've come to the wrong place.
I don't mean to worry you,
she says. I'm glad to hear that, I says. I wasn't sure. I thought I might have been mistaken. Do you want anything? After a while, she says,
No, not anything.
Then she went away. I took the box down and counted out the money and hid the box again and unlocked the door and went out. I thought about the camphor, but it would be too late now anyway, and I'd just have one more round trip. She was out the door waiting. You want anything from town? I says.
No, she says. I don't mean to meddle in your affairs, but I don't know what I'd do if anything happened to you, Jason.
I'm all right, I says. Just a headache.
I wish you'd take some aspirin, she says. I know you're not going to stop using the car.
What's the car got to do with it? I says. How can a car give a man a headache?
You know gasoline always made you sick, she says. Ever since you was a child. I wish you'd take some aspirin.
Keep on wishing it, I says. It won't hurt you. I got in the car and started back to town. I had just turned onto a street when I saw a Ford come helling toward me. All of a sudden, it stopped. I could hear the wheels sliding, and it slewed around and backed and whirled, and just as I was thinking what the hell they were up to, I saw that red tie. Then I recognized her face looking back through the window. It whirled into the alley. I saw it turn again, but when I got to the back street, it was just disappearing, running like hell. I saw red. When I recognized that red tie, after all I had told her, I forgot about everything. I never thought about my head even until I came to the first forks and had to stop. Yet we spend money on roads, and damn if it isn't like trying to drive over a sheet of corrugated iron roofing. I'd like to know how a man could be expected to keep up with even a wheelbarrow. I think too much of my car. I'm not going to hammer it to pieces like it was a Ford. Chances were they had stolen it anyway, so why should they give a damn? Like I say, blood always tells. If you got blood like that in you, you'll do anything. I says whatever claim you believe she has on you already has been discharged. I says from now on you have only yourself to blame because you know what any sensible person would do. I says if I got to spend half of my time being a damn detective, at least I'll go where I can get paid for it. So I had to stop there at the forks. Then I remembered it. It felt like somebody was inside with a hammer beating on it. I says, I've tried to keep you from being worried by her. I says, as far as I'm concerned, let her go to hell as fast as she pleases, and the sooner the better. I says, what else do you expect except every drummer and cheap show that comes to town, because even these town jelly beans give her the go-by now. You don't know what goes on, I says. You don't hear the talk that I hear, and you can just bet I shut them up too. I says, my people owned slaves here when you were all running little shirt-tail country stores and farming land no end would look on by shares. If they ever farmed it. It's a good thing the Lord did something for this country. The folks that live on it never have. Friday afternoon, from right here I could see 3 miles of land that hadn't ever been broken. And every able-bodied man in the county was in town at that show. I might have Been a stranger to starving to death, and there wasn't a soul in sight to ask which way to town, even. And she trying to get me to take aspirin. I says, when I eat bread, I'll do it at the table. I says, you always talking about how much you give us for when you could buy 10 new dresses a year on the money you spend for those damn patent medicines. It's not something to cure it. I need it's just an even break. Not to have them, but as long as I have to work 10 hours a day to support a kitchen full of inns in the style they're accustomed to, and send them to the show with every other inn in the country. One, he was late already. By the time he got there, it'd be over. After a while, he got up to the car, and when I finally got it through, he said that if 2 people in a Ford had passed him, he said yes. So I went on, and when I came to where the wagon road turned off, I could see the tire tracks. Ab Russell was in his lot, but I didn't bother to ask him, and I hadn't got out of sight of his barn hardly when I saw the Ford. They had tried to hide it, done about as well as she did anything else she did. Like I say, it's not that I object it so much. Maybe she can't help it. It's because she hasn't even got enough consideration for her own family to have discretion. I'm afraid all the time I'll run into them right in the middle of the street or under a wagon on the square like a couple of dogs. I parked and got out. And now I have to go way around and cross a plowed field. The only one I'd seen since I left town, with every step like somebody was walking along behind me, hitting me on the head with a club. I kept thinking that when I got across the field, at least I'd have something level to walk on that wouldn't jolt me every step. But when I got into the woods, it was full of underbrush, and I had to twist around through it. Then I came to a ditch full of briars. I went along it for a while, but it got thicker and thicker. And all the time, Earl probably telephoned home about where I was and getting Mother all upset again. When I'd finally got through and I had to wander around so much that I had to stop and figure out just where the car would be, I knew they wouldn't be far from it, just under the closest bush. So I turned and worked back toward the road. Then I couldn't tell just how far I was, so I'd have to stop and listen. And then, with my legs not using so much blood, it would all go into my head like it would explode any minute. And the sun getting down to just where it could shine straight into my eyes and my ears ringing, so I couldn't hear anything. I went on, trying to move quiet, and then I heard a dog or something, and I knew that when he scented me, he'd have come to hell and up. Then it would be all off. I'd gotten beggar lice and twigs and stuff all over me, inside my clothes and shoes and all, and then I happened to look around, and I had my right hand on a bunch of poison oak. The only thing I couldn't understand was, why was it just poison oak and not a snake or something? So I didn't even bother to move it. I just stood there until the dog went away, and then I went on. I didn't have any idea where the car was now. I couldn't think about anything except my head, and I'd just stand in one place and sort of wonder if I'd really seen a Ford even. And not even care much whether I had or not. Like I say, let her lay out all day and all night with everybody in town that wears pants. What do I care? I don't know anybody, anything that has no consideration for me. Wouldn't be a damn bit above planting that Ford there and making me spend a whole afternoon, and Earl taking her back there and showing her the books just because he's too damn virtuous for this world. I says, you'll have one hell of a time in heaven without anybody's business to meddle in. Only don't you ever let me catch you at it, I says. I closed my eyes to it because of your grandmother, but just because you let me catch you doing it one time on this place where my mother lives. These damn little slick-haired squirts thinking they aren't raising so much hell. I'll show them something about hell, I says, and you too. And I'll make him think that damn red tie is the latch string to hell if he thinks he can run the woods with my niece. With the sun in all my eyes and my blood going, so I kept thinking every time my head would go on and burst and get it over with briars and things grabbing at me. And then I come onto the sand ditch where they had been, and I recognized the tree where the car was. And just as I got out of the ditch and started running, I heard the car start. It went off fast, blowing the horn. They kept on blowing it, like it was saying, yeah, 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 going out of sight. Got to the road just in time to see it go out of sight. By the time I got up to where my car was, they were clean out of sight, horn still blowing. Well, I never thought about it except I was saying run. Run back to town. Run home and try to convince Mother that I never saw you in that car. Try to make her believe that I don't know who he was. Try to make her believe that I didn't miss 10 feet of catching you in that dirt. Try to make her believe you were standing up, too. It kept on saying, yeah, 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 getting fainter and fainter. Then it quit,
and I could hear a cow lowing up at Russell's barn. And still I never thought. I went up to the door and opened it and raised my foot. I kind of thought then that the car was leaning a little more than the slant of the road would be, but I never found it until I got it and started off. Well, I just sat there. It was getting on towards sundown, and the town was about 5 miles. They never even had the guts enough to puncture it, jab a hole in it. They just let the air out. I stood there for a while thinking about that kitchen full of ends, and not one of them had time to lift the tire onto the rack and screw up a couple of bolts. It's kind of funny because even she couldn't have seen far enough ahead to take the pump out on purpose. Unless she thought about it while she was letting out the air, maybe. But what it probably was somebody took it out and gave it to Ben to play with for a squirt gun because they'd take the whole car to pieces if he wanted it. And Dilsey says, ain't nobody teached your car. What we want to fool with it for? And I says, you're an in. You're lucky, do you know it? I says, I'll swap with you any day because it takes a white man not to have any more sense than to worry about what a little slut of a girl does. I walked up to Russell's. He had a pump. It was just an oversight on their part, I reckon. Only I still couldn't believe she'd have the nerve to. I kept on thinking that I don't know why it is I can't seem to learn that a woman will do anything. I kept thinking, let's forget for a while how I feel toward you and how you feel toward me. I just wouldn't do you this way. I wouldn't do you this way no matter what you've done to me because, like I say, blood is blood and you can't get around it. It's not playing a joke that any 8-year-old boy would have thought of. It's letting your own uncle be laughed at by a man that would wear a red tie. They come into town and call us a bunch of hicks and think it's too small to hold them. Well, he doesn't know just how right he is. And her, too. If that's the way she feels about it, she better keep right on going in a damn good riddance. I stopped and returned Russell's pump and drove on to town. I went to the drugstore and got a Coca-Cola, and then I went to the telegraph office. It had closed at 12:21. 40 points down. 40 times $5. Buy something with that if you can. And she'll say, I've got to have it. I've just got to have it. I'll say, that's too bad. You'll have to try somebody else. I haven't got the money. I've been too busy to make any.